What's going on, ladies and gents? This is Bento with another Steam controller playtest, and this time I'm going to be trying it out on Soma. I thought Soma would be a pretty fun game to try, and I did do Dead Space 2 as probably my first horror game on the Steam controller, but Soma has a bigger emphasis on sneaking, and so I thought it'd be pretty nifty to do with the Steam controller. So let's go to the actual control scheme. So I am using a hybrid keyboard and gamepad setup, and Soma's actually really nice about that, so there's no tooltip hints that sort of go in between. I am actually, but for the majority of the controller setup, it actually reflects the regular gamepad setup for Soma. So in this case, the left trigger is to sprint. The right trigger is the interact button or pick up object button. Left bumper is to actually throw that object. The right bumper is to lean while using the left thumbstick to move. The left trackpad, I actually have it as the D-pad setup, so if you pick up an object, it'll rotate items or objects wherever you need to. Right trackpad is just the typical camera movement. It is a mouse style of input with trackball function. And I do have gyro enabled, or motion control and gyro enabled, so if you need to move, you hold the right trackpad. And I do have lean options for that as well, so left and right. And this actually uses Q and E instead, which is on the keyboard. The left thumbstick is just to move as usual. Clicking actually does nothing because there's nothing really to use it for. The face buttons are very typical. The Y is the flashlight, B is to crouch, A is to jump, and the X button actually does nothing. For the left grip, I have crouch also, and the right grip is just to jump. For the select button, or the left center button, I do have the inventory, so if you ever pick up an object, so just to show you guys, if I pick up the Omni tool and then I hit select, it'll actually show it. And the start button is just the menu option. Also, something cool I really found out, and thanks to the top Steam community guide for this, is that there is actually a double tap function where if you were to hit the right trackpad, if you have the mouse style of input, it'll actually activate a certain button for you. So for now, I have it actually to the flashlight. So I thought that's really cool, especially for Soma, because you do need to get your flashlight on half the time. And that's also nice because in case you do have a click function for your right trackpad, I don't have anything right now, but you can have a third function or a second activate function for the trackpad just by double tapping. So that's really cool. Alright, let's show you guys some actual gameplay. So this portion of Soma is actually very early on in the game. It's the second monster you have to sneak around, but I thought there was enough mechanics in terms of interacting with panels and stuff to show you guys, and so I thought this segment might be a good start. The Steam controller works pretty well with Soma. I actually attribute it similar to my Dishonored gameplay, since there is a lot of sneaking around and you have to make sure you go undetected. The lean options really help. I think they're fun to do with the gyro motion. Obviously, if you're not comfortable using that, you can always just use the lean button in conjunction with the left thumbstick. But I like it overall. I think the motion control also helped with interacting with objects, and in case I need to be a little more accurate for some. Not that I've needed it yet, but if ever you do, it's always there. What I really like about Soma is how accessible it is in terms of keyboard and gamepad support. In some games, there's usually weird interruptions where I'm switching between the two, but Soma does a good job of making sure both functions work seamlessly. And also, what I really like with the mouse trackpad is how easy it is to interact. It's funny because with that type of puzzle, I actually don't like having to move my mouse so much in a circular motion, but with the trackpad, and I guess with the thumbstick too, it just feels a lot more comfortable, and so I really like that I get to do that here. One thing I did have to get used to though is having my sprint on the left trigger. Granted, Soma doesn't have any shooting mechanics because you can't actually fight in this game. Well, you could always throw objects at things, I guess, but since there is no shooting, there is no aiming down, I think the sprint to the left trigger actually works appropriately. But if you're used to having sprint on the left thumbstick to click, I guess you could always switch it. But I don't think there's any toggle function for Soma, so you kind of have to work around that. If you do want it on the thumbstick, you're gonna have to hold it down, which kind of feels uncomfortable. So I think does work well to be on the left trigger instead. You could also put it on the grips, but for me personally, I just prefer to have jump and crouch for either of my grips. I guess since the motion controls are also tied to your mouse style of input, you could use that for other puzzles as well. Maybe if you want to lift a switch, you could just jerk your motion control upwards or downwards. Not that I'll ever need to use it for turning wheels because the right trackpad is there anyway.
What are you?
Are you blind? It's me. Carl Semke. Wrangler? Any of this sound familiar to you?
No, actually.
Well, thanks for being so helpful. It's not like I'm...
Another thing you could do with movement, instead of having it tied to your left thumbstick, if you want and if you're comfortable with it, you could actually just put your movement to your left trackpad. And you could actually make use of the outer ring wheel. And by that I mean you could just have walking and moving within the inner circle. And then if you want to sprint, all you need to do is assign the shift function to the outer ring wheel. I've seen it done before for other FPS games, and a lot of community players like to do it too. I just personally prefer to have my movement on my left thumbstick because I'm just so used to that already.
Just get me a doctor.
Obviously you guys can change the gamepad controls to however you want, but I think Soma's gamepad controls honestly works really well. I think in general for my third person and first person games, I always almost exclusively use the mouse style of input with trackball motion on. It just feels so much better, and I really don't like using regular joystick inputs for the right trackpad, considering how big the surface area is. And well, if you guys are familiar with right thumbstick movement, all you have to do is tilt, and it doesn't really transition well to the right trackpad at all. If any of you guys have ever played Soma, I think it's a really good game. It's not as scary and I guess as frightening as I thought it would be, but it is definitely more, I guess, philosophically frightening because of all the themes and motifs they introduce in the game. So this is just one more sneaking monster I gotta get through, and then that'll be the end of the video. There's a lot of waiting, because unfortunately I just wanted to be safe. But overall, I really liked Soma with the Steam controller. I think it works absolutely well, especially since it is an FPS horror game. If you do try this, I think it's also worth trying with Amnesia and even Penumbra. You may have to configure controls slightly for those games because they are a little more dated. I'm not too sure how well the gamepad and keyboard support are for those games, but I'm sure if you guys work with either or, it'll probably work out. If you do decide to customize the controller, I think Soma is much more gamepad friendly than it is keyboard and mouse friendly. And that's primarily just because the controls are kind of set for the gamepad. Granted, I still like having the mouse style of input for the right trackpad. You could emulate your keyboard and mouse if you wanted to, but for the sake of convenience and just making your mapping a lot easier, and I guess because the game also does kind of give tooltip hints, I think going with the gamepad control scheme works a lot better. So that's all from me, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.